This is some help. I'm going to go over the Illustrator PenTool Anchor Points and Paths assignment. If you notice in Canvas, there are two parts to that. There is this pen tool exercise as well as the shapes or mixed shapes exercise. The pen tool is probably one of the most powerful and important tools to master. It does have kind of a steep learning curve, and what I would suggest is just take time to practice it. The pen tool is located right here on your palette or in your toolbar. You can get it by either clicking on it, or you can hit P on the keyboard. And what the pen tool does is it allows you to organically create some of those anchor points. So you can create rounded shapes, you can create square shapes, you can start to modify those shapes. I'm holding the Option or Alt key down to convert that anchor point tool. If I just click and don't click and drag, it is a square shape. And so really, again, it's just a matter of practicing it. So this first exercise, and I've got it open here, has several different exercises for you to do. If you notice, I'm going to back out Command minus. There are 3 artboards in this exercise. And what we want to do is go through each of these and follow the path and pay attention to the notes that are here that'll give you some hints on how to work through each of these shapes. And one thing that's going to be important before you get started is to go to View and make sure that you have Smart Guides off. So we want it unchecked. And then you want to make sure that you don't have Snap to Grid, Snap to Pixel, or Snap to Point. Have those all unchecked. And then the other thing that you want to do is make sure that the Snap to Grid is unchecked. And that's just going to make it a little bit easier for you to pull the anchor points where you need to. So if you feel like you're not able to manipulate the points, make sure all of those are unchecked. Now, this exercise gives you some notes about what the different pen tool states are. So we've got this main pen tool shape, and this is a little bit different because they've changed the icon in the newer version of Illustrator, but they're very similar. And then they've got some designations with a blue for clicking or clicking and pressing. Red is where you'll drag a handle to, and it'll make more sense here in a minute. And then, or you can drag a handle of an existing anchor point. So I'm going to just go through these different exercises here, and you can kind of follow along. So the first one that I'm going to start with is on this far left artboard, and I'm going to hit Command plus. I'm going to get in there close so that I can see what I've got going on. The other thing that is going to be helpful is to make sure that before you start, you've got your pen tool, and you go up here in the upper left-hand corner, and let's remove the fill. So you do none with that red slash, and then we want to make our stroke 3-point black. So now that I've got the pen tool, I'm going to start with number 1. And I'm going to click just in the middle of that circle, and it doesn't have to be perfect, but make sure you get kind of close. So I'm going to click once, and then I'm going to click on number 2, and then to get a straight line from number 2 to 3 to make sure that it doesn't deviate like that, I'm going to hit undo or Command Z to undo, is if I hold the Shift key, it'll snap into a straight line. So now that I've got that, I'm going to click on number 4. I'm going to hold the Shift key down to click to number 5. Then number 6, hold the Shift key down. And then I want this to be a straight line, so I'm going to hold the Shift key on each of these clicks. I'm still holding the Shift key. Then I'm going to let go of the Shift key. Number 12, hold it down again. 13, 14, hold the Shift to get a nice straight line. And then what we want to do is we want to close this shape up. So when we go back to this spot here, we want to make sure that it has that little circle next to the pen tool. So if I go back here, you can see that it's closed that shape. Okay, so that's the straight line. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this curved line here. And this is where we're starting to create what's known as a Bezier curve, or Bezier curve, however you want to say it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually click with the pen tool, and I'm going to drag out. And if you notice, it's got these handles, so we've got that point right in the center, and I'm going to drag that handle out till I get to the center of that red number 2 there. So now I've let go, and then I'm going to go to number 3, and I'm going to click and drag. And if you notice, what's happening is going the opposite direction than I want it to go. So I'm going to undo all the way back, and the thing that I forgot to do is hold the shift key down. So I'm going to click and hold the shift key down. And then if I click and drag, and I actually know what I'm doing now, so I've got to actually drag it to this direction. So what I was doing, just so you know, is I was actually dragging it the wrong direction. So I need to click, and you've got to drag it in the direction that you want the curve to go. Hold the shift key down, and then click on the next one. If you notice, the curve flips to the right instead of the left. I'm going to hold the shift key down. Okay. Then go to the next one, and I'm going to click and drag, holding the shift key down so that I can keep that point straight. Go to the next, and I'm going to click and drag, and I want to drag in the direction of that red circle. And then the next one, I'm going to click and drag and hold the shift key down. Okay, and don't be afraid to undo it, to try it multiple times if you don't feel like you got it quite right. Again, it's practice. Now, the one thing that I'm going to have to do now is I'm going to have to deselect, because if I try and go to the next thing, I'm still connected to this point. And so what I'm going to do is hit escape on the keyboard, and it will allow me to start a new line. So I hit escape. So I'm going to actually go to this next one, this curved line. It looks kind of complicated, but just follow the instructions here. So got the pen tool, I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag towards the red. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to find number 3. I'm going to click and drag my handle down to the number 4 here. So now I've got to find number 5, and I'm going to click and drag up to the 6. And then I'm going to find 7, and I'm going to click and drag to the 8. And then I'm going to find 9, and I'm going to click and drag. And what you're going to do is you're going to get used to how those shapes are formed as you click and drag out those handles. So now I'm to there, and then I'm going to go to 11, click and drag. Then I'm going to go to 13 and click and drag. So to 15. And then to 17. Then I'm going to go to 19. And then back to number 1. So, and then I connected that shape. And you've got to make sure that right when you get up there, you actually click right on that shape. And I've got to click and drag. Now what you can do after the fact is, if you, let's say, you can either redraw it or you can always modify these shapes. That's what's great about the pen tool or any of these vector shapes. I can get my regular selection tool and I can click back on this line and I can modify those curves. But really just kind of practice clicking and dragging and pulling those points out. So now I'm going to go to my curves with corner points. So I've got my pen tool again. I'm going to click and I'm going to hold the shift key down and drag it to this number 2. And it's going to create kind of a scalloped edge here. I'm going to click on number 3 and hold the shift key. I'm going to click on it and I'm going to let go, and then I'm going to click on it again and hold the shift key down. And so that's going to be important. So I'm going to do that one more time for you. I'm going to click and hold the shift key down. On the next one, I'm going to click and let go, and then click on it and drag and hold the shift key down. And then I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to click and let go, and then I'm going to click and drag and hold the shift key down. The next one, I'm going to click in the middle and let go, and then I'm going to click and hold the shift key down. And then I'm going to go to the next one and I'm going to click and release. Okay, so just make sure you follow these instructions to click, let go of it, and then press it, click again on the anchor point, and then hold the shift key. Okay, I'm going to hit escape so that I'm not connected to that anymore, and I'm going to hold the space bar so I can click and drag with this hand to get to the next page. So what I'm going to do here is this one has some different shapes, but this is a little bit different because we're not going to just click and drag. We're going to actually modify that handle using a modifier key. So this first one, I'm going to click and hold the shift key down and drag it out to number 2. And then I'm going to go to the next one and click and drag and hold it out to number 4. But at this point, what we're going to do is, so we can control this shape going forward, we're going to actually move this handle now over to here. And the way we do that is we hold Alt or Option on the keyboard, and if you notice it changes it to this Convert Anchor Point tool. And we're going to click on that and just move it to where this green number 5 is. Now, if I go to the next one, it's going to let me go to 7. And then if you notice, if I just try and do this next one, the curve is going the wrong direction, so I've got to hold Alt and click and drag it over to this 8, and then my curve is going to go the right direction. So I'm going to click and drag and hold the shift key, and then I'm going to click back on this handle with the Alt or Option key selected and go to number 11. And then I'm scrolling down a little bit, and I'm going to click and drag, holding the shift key, and then I'm going to hold the Option or Alt and click on that point and go to number 14. And I can always hit the space bar so I can use my little hand to grab. And then I'm going to click and I'm going to drag. And this, and actually one thing I noticed when I was going over this template, this didn't quite make it all the way over, and I think it's because this point didn't get dragged out far enough. So I'm actually going to back up. I'm going to do Command Z, Command Z, Command Z. So here I've got this one. I'm going to click and drag here, and I'm going to hold the shift key, and if you notice I need to actually pull it out a little bit further. Now this shape is working better here. Then I'm still going to do the same thing, hold the Alt or Option key and back to the green number 14, and then I'm going to click and drag here, and this one actually needs to be a little bit further out as well. So just kind of pay attention to that. You don't have to be exactly in that circle. Get it as close as you can there. Okay, I'm going to hit Escape on the keyboard so I can go to the next one. So this next one is combining some curves and with some straight lines. So what I want to do is I want to start with number 1. So if you notice it says click, and I'm going to hold the shift key down and I'm going to let go. And then this next one I'm going to click and hold the shift key down to here. And then what I want to do is I want to click back on this point and then hold the shift key down when I click to the next one. So that's the key to get this straight point. You've got to click back on the point and hold the shift key down to make a straight line here. And then I'm going to click back on there and then click and drag that handle up to here. And then I can click and drag. And then the key is to click back on that point, hold the shift key to get a straight line here, and then I let go and I'm going to click and drag up to this point. And click over here, hold the shift key down, click back on that point and let go, hold shift and click, and then click and drag here and let go, and then back to this point, click and drag and hold the shift key down, and then you get your straight points there. So I'm going to hit Escape on the keyboard So I'm not connected to this line anymore. Now I'm going to go to this next one. So this one gets a little bit more complicated, but if you just follow the instructions here, it should work. So we've got to find number 1 here. So here's number 1. So we're going to click and drag up to this point. Then we're going to go to the next point, number 3. We're going to click and drag to number 4. Now if you notice, we need to, number 5 is a green one, so we're going to hold the Alt or Option and go to number 5. So we're moving that handle up there so we can go back this direction, and then I'm going to click and drag to number 7. And since we want to go back the other direction, I've got to hold the Alt or Option and click to number 8, or drag it to number 8. Then we're going to go to number 9. And then we've got to move this handle back, so I'm going to hold Option or Alt. Okay. Then I've got to go to number 12. So I'm going to click and drag all the way up here to 13. Then we've got to move this handle back to where number 14 is. Okay. And then looks like we've got to go to number 15. Click and drag. And I accidentally clicked to the side, so just to connect back to that point, what I can do is I can click back on that point, and then I can click and drag and connect back to it. Now what happened is I'm missing some of that curvature that's going forward, so I'm going to actually undo, and I'm going to click and drag my handle up there and then hold the Alt Option back to 14, and then it should give me my curve I need going forward. So if you notice, that curve is a little bit better. And go back to 16, and then I'm going to hold the Alt or Option and move it to 17. Then click and drag up to 19, hold Alt Option to 17. Okay, and then we're going to go to 20, out to 21, Alt Option to 22, and then we're going to go to 24. We're going to take that point to 25, Alt Option to 25, and then we're going to click back on here. And if you notice, what happens is it's making this kind of go crazy. And so the one thing that we've got to do is we've got to hold the Alt Option when we connect back, and that way it won't mess with this curve going forward. So instead of just clicking and dragging like we normally do, hold Alt Option on this last one, and then our lines will be okay going forward. Okay, so it looks like we're building a tree here. That's the top part of the tree. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to 28 here, and I'm going to hold the Command key and click on the artboard. And what that does is it switches to our direct selection tool, and we can deselect this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click on 29, and then I'm going to click and let go, and then click and drag to 30, and that's going to give us the curve we need going forward. And then we're going to click on 31 and drag to 32. Okay, and then we're going to click back on that one, and then I'm going to hold the Shift key to go to number 34, and I let go, and then I'm going to click and drag to 36. I'm going to go to 37 and click and drag up to 38, and then I can go up to 39 and just hold the Shift key to get a nice straight line, and then I'm going to hit Escape on the keyboard so that we're not connected to this line anymore. Okay, so there's our tree. Now this is the last one that's a little bit tricky, and so we're going to actually back out a little bit. And it's good to just kind of practice where these handles go. And one thing that some people do is they'll start to draw a shape, and they'll click and drag, and they'll kind of freak out because the palette's moving. Don't worry about that, because you can always let go and then hold the space bar down and get back to where you want to go to. I'm going to undo these. So what we're going to do first is we're going to click here on 1, and we're going to drag this out to 2. Then we're going to go to 3 and click and drag. Now this is the one part where it's a little bit different. We're going to hold down the Command or Control key and click back on that point and drag that point down to 6. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we can go forward to 7, and it'll help us get that curve we want to 7, and we can drag out to 8. Now what happens if I'm going to back up here? So I'm going to click here and drag to 2, click to 3, and drag to 4. Now if I don't modify this and I try and get this curve going back, we're going to have to go really, really far out here to get that curve. And so that's why it's important when you get to this next point that we modify it. So I'm going to go back to 3 and drag that here, and then I'm going to hold Command or Control. This is different than Alt, so this is Command, and I'm going to move that handle down here to 6, and then it's going to allow me to get the curve I want going to the point number 7. So now we're going to drag that out here, and then what we're going to do is hold the Alt option, and we're going to move this handle all the way here so we can go back the other direction. And then we're going to click on 10. Oh, I missed the point here. I've got to go back. I'm just going to hit Command Z. Get back to this point here. And then I'm going to move this, holding the option. Make sure you're holding the right modifier key. I hit Command instead of Option Alt, so here. And then I go to 10, and we want to drag it out to the 11, and then what we want to do is we're holding the Command Control key to move this here, and then we'll be able to go back to 13, and I have to make sure and hold the Alt Option key so I don't mess with this other curve. Okay, so just look at these. If something's going kind of screwy, look at these different hints that are here. Now, there's one last thing that I want you to do before you submit this file. So there are the ability to have multiple layers within Illustrator. And so on your palettes on this right hand side, it looks like a couple of sheets of paper stacked. I want you to show that. And if you notice there's a working layer, that's where we've been putting all of our lines on, and there's a template layer. What I want you to do is I want you to hide that template layer by clicking on this little eyeball. So what you should have should look something like this when you submit it. So that's what that final file will look like. And then what you do is you hit Save As, and then add your name to it, and then you can hit Save. And that will be the file that you upload. Now there is one other exercise here, and this has got some shapes. I'll show you what it looks like, but you guys are going to have to go through that on your own. So I've got it here in this PenTool shapes. So this is a combination of some straight lines as well as some organic shapes. And so I'll let you you guys go through that exercise on your own. Work through it and then ask questions if you have questions. Okay, that's all.